China commemorated the 70th anniversary of its victory over Japan in World War II with grand celebrations watched all around the globe. President Park Geun-hye, along with dozens of world leaders, have joined President Xi Jinping for the ceremony, the highlight of which a massive military parade through Beijing's Tiananmen Square. Our Choi Yu-sun, who's traveling with President Park Geun-hye, sent us this report.
Under clear skies, tens of thousands of people gathered at Tiananmen Square to celebrate China's victory in World War II following Japan's surrender 70 years ago. Addressing the crowd, President Xi Jinping paid tribute to the Chinese who fought and defeated Japan's aggressions in the war. He also vowed to cut 300,000 of China's military personnel. Looking over Tiananmen Square, President Park Geun-hye was seated on President Xi's right, 2 seats away and next to Russian President Vladimir Putin. This reflects how much Seoul and Beijing's relations have developed in stark contrast to Beijing's ties with traditional ally Pyongyang. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un did not attend, with his envoy Choi Ryong-hae seated a distance from the Chinese leader. Some 12,000 troops, 200 aircraft, as well as tanks and missiles were showcased through the square, and Chinese state media reported that some 80% of the machinery was unveiled for the first time. President Park's attendance at the Chinese military parade, the centerpiece of Thursday's ceremonies, garnered media attention after U.S. President Barack Obama and most Western leaders decided not to attend. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was also absent. The Western states view the parade as both anti-Japanese and Beijing's way of flaunting its military prowess amid growing tensions in the region. The Korean president's attendance is viewed as Seoul's way of trying to take the diplomatic initiative in the region and balance its relations with key ally Washington and major regional partner Beijing. After the parade, President Park joined other VIP guests at a luncheon hosted by President Xi, where Xi is reported to have ordered officials to provide extra care to the Korean leader. President Park now travels to Shanghai to mark the reopening of headquarters of Korea's provisional government during Japan's colonial rule. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News, Beijing.
Shifting gears, the main opposition party's floor leader Lee Jong-gol gave his parliamentary address Thursday. In it, he stressed the need to reform Korea's conglomerates and to improve inter-Korean relations as the key agenda for the second half of this year. Kim Young-gil has more.
The New Politics Alliance for Democracy floor leader emphasized proclaiming a second season of economic democratization. This, he says, may be achieved through empowering smaller companies and reforming the family-owned conglomerates, or 재벌, which dominate the South Korean economy.
Our goal is to reform the governance structure of conglomerates by separating their ownership and management. For smaller companies, we will support R&D through improved financing. For subcontractors, we will ensure fair trade to raise their competitiveness.
He also called for new regulations to control or even ban existing cross-shareholding.
For subcontractors, we will ensure fair trade to raise their competitiveness.
He also called for new regulations to control or even ban existing cross-shareholding arrangements that give 재벌 owners dictatorial power over their companies. He said measures are needed to restrict an owner's family from controlling such vast business empires, and that steps need taking to urge transparency in their management structures. On North Korean matters, he said the time is now right to resume dialogue between the two Koreas.
I suggest President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to hold summit talks before the year's end. I also suggest inter-Korean parliamentary talks to jointly commemorate the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan this year.
He added that what we learned from last month's military standoff with North Korea is that dialogue is the only solution to maintaining peace and security on the Korean peninsula. He called for increasing civilian exchanges and restoring military hotlines between the two Koreas. As the MPAD floor leader, Lee pointed out that more trade and economic cooperation with North Korea can benefit the South Korean economy at a period of slow growth. 지명규, 아리랑 뉴스.
In fact, Korea's economic scorecard for the second quarter is out, and it doesn't look good. GDP growth remains rooted in the 0% range, and gross national income dropped for the first time in more than 4 years. Prospects for the coming months don't look promising either. Song Ji-sun reports.
Korea's gross national income, a key indicator of purchasing power, has dropped for the first time in 4.5 years. According to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, Korea's real GNI for the April to June period declined 0.1% from the first quarter. The nation's GDP growth over the same period was estimated at 0.3%, as earlier announced, staying in the 0% range for the fifth consecutive quarter. Exports edged up 0.3%, while imports gained a bit more at 0.8%. According to the Bank of Korea on Thursday, Korea's real GNI for the April to June period declined 0.1% from the first quarter. The nation's GDP growth over the same period was estimated at 0.3%, as earlier announced, staying in the 0% range for the fifth consecutive quarter. Exports edged up 0.3%, while imports gained a bit more at 0.9%. Central bank officials attribute the fall in GNI to a drop in interest and dividend income earned from residents overseas. That dropped to below $1 billion from $5 billion in the first quarter, as most domestic firms received their foreign dividends in the first 3 months of the year. Spending on retail, wholesales, food and beverage products dropped 0.7% due to fears about the MERS outbreak that hit the nation in the second quarter. Domestic consumption fell 0.2%, but government spending rose 0.8%. Despite government efforts to boost domestic sentiment, experts say it's highly unlikely we'll see a rebound in the second half. A prolonged period of low growth is projected due to external factors like the slowing Chinese economy. Song Ji-sun, 아리랑 뉴스.
The world, it's midday on Thursday, September 3rd here in Seoul. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. China is commemorating the 70th anniversary of victory over Japan in World War II, with its grand victory celebrations being watched all around the globe. President Park Geun-hye, along with dozens of world leaders, have joined Chinese President Xi Jinping for the ceremony, the highlight of which being the massive military parade through Beijing's Tiananmen Square. For details, we connect to our Che Yu-sun, who is travelling with President Park on her China trip. Yu-sun.
Mark, under a clear sky here in Beijing, tens of thousands of people have gathered to celebrate the end of World War II 70 years ago. Proceedings started about an hour ago at 10 a.m. Beijing time with a playing of the Chinese anthem, hoisting of the flag, and President Xi Jinping's speech. In his address, President Xi paid tribute to the Chinese people who fought hard and defeated Japan's aggressions in the war. Looking over Tiananmen Square, President Park is 2 seats from President Xi on his right side, next to Russian President Vladimir Putin. On her right is the Kazakh president. Former Chinese leaders, including President Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and former Premier Wen Jiabao are also there. The centerpiece of today's ceremonies is the military parade, a showcase of China's 12,000 troops, 200 aircraft, as well as tanks and missiles. Chinese state media reported that some 80% of the machinery are being unveiled for the first time. Considering the parade as both anti-Japanese and Beijing's way of flaunting its military prowess amid growing tensions in the region, U.S. President Barack Obama and most Western leaders have decided not to attend. And that is why President Park's decision to attend received a lot of media attention, as it's seen as his way of trying to take the lead in diplomacy in the region and balancing its relations with key ally Washington and major regional partner Beijing. Neither Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe nor North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are present. From the north, ruling party secretary Choi Ryong-hae is attending the event. Mark?
Yeah, we're just looking at some images as you speak, Yu-sun. And if you could tell us a little bit more about today's Victory Day?
Sure. China calls the end of World War II anniversary the 70th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of resistance against Japanese aggression and the world anti-fascist war. One day after Japan surrendered in the war in 1945, China designated September 3rd as Victory over Japan Day and has been publicly celebrating the occasion every 5 to 10 years. And last year, China officially declared the day as Victory Day, and it's the first time that the country has invited world leaders for the celebrations. After today's parade, President Park will join other VIP guests at a luncheon at the Great Hall of the People hosted by President Xi. The Chinese leader, who has expressed his gratitude of President Park's attendance by holding a separate summit and luncheon yesterday, is reported to have ordered his officials in charge of protocol to pay an extra attention to President Park. President Park is scheduled to travel to Shanghai later today to attend a ceremony there to mark the reopening of headquarters that belonged to Korea's provisional government during Japan's colonial rule. Before returning home Friday evening, she will meet with Korean residents in Shanghai, as well as business leaders from both Korea and China. This was Chi Yu-san reporting on President Park's attendance at China's war victory ceremony.
Korea's main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is emphasizing the proclaiming of a second session of economic democratization by empowering smaller companies and reforming the family-owned conglomerates which dominate South Korea's economy. During Thursday's parliamentary address, the NPAD's floor leader, Lee Jong-gol, called on the ruling Saenuri party's full support for economic diversification and, importantly, to support curbing the influence of chaebols, or the family-controlled conglomerates. Now, Lee said reforming the conglomerates should be the top priority during the National Assembly's regular session. Concerning North Korean matters, Lee suggested summit talks between President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to be held before the end of the year. He also called for inter-Korean parliamentary talks to jointly commemorate the 70th anniversary of Korea's independence from Japan later this year. Now back here in Korea and at the National Assembly, and most of the talk there is centered around ways to overhaul the nation's rigid labour market. Kim Moo-sung, head of the ruling Saenuri party, told a packed assembly on Wednesday that the reforms are his party's top priority. Ji Myung-gil has more.
The ruling bloc's chief identified labor market reform as the core item on its agenda for the second half of this year, calling it the key to boosting the nation's slowing economy and generating jobs for the youth.
The ultimate goal of labor reforms is to create jobs, especially for the young, and reduce labor costs to stimulate corporate investment. We also want to create a business-friendly environment to improve performance and encourage new investments.
Kim said job creation would lead to economic growth and provide welfare for the people. He added that labor market reform was the cornerstone for headway on other reforms, reiterating the need to reorganize the entire workforce and labor market system. The ruling party chief also promised to push ahead with reforms regarding how major conglomerates or 재벌 are run.
Public resentment is growing over how family-controlled conglomerates are running their vast empires and the outmoded governance structure, which often leads to ugly fights. We must also stop conglomerates from gaining profit through unfair transactions in the market.
However, he stressed that reform should not be used to drag the conglomerates down or promote anti-corporate sentiment. Kim also promised to uphold President Park Geun-hye's 4 major reform drives centered on the labor, public, finance, and education sectors. Responding to Kim Moo-sung's speech, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's chief, Moon Jae-in, said it lacked content on how to reform the conglomerates, and added that Kim made no mention of raising corporate taxes. Ji Myung-gil.